التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير والاتباع وجلاله مرضاته وقربه ثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. Hold on 1 minute. Who's not got a sheet? Then I can photocopy a few more. Just 1, 2.
Just
My sisters don't have a sheet.
Shaykh Naveed, we can share.
3, 4, 2.
We
need like 10 copies.
We can share.
Let's make 10 just in case. Inshallah, we'll get some copies around in a few moments, inshallah. Okay, so Bismillah, Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair first of all for coming. Inshallah, this isn't a lesson, it's more of a discussion. And just to get together and look at the sayings of the ulama when it comes to in regards to raising children. And this is obviously it's classical advice, but in modern times. So many people have this, they will think that this classical advice, it doesn't apply today, but yes it does. Because this advice is taken from the Quran and the Sunnah, and from the Prophet ﷺ and from the Sahaba. It still applies today, so the principles are exactly the same. There's no difference in the principles, but the methodology has changed. So then we have to look at the different ways that we apply those principles and how we raise our children. And alhamdulillah, it's a much needed subject in our times that we're living in, especially in the West, because if you're in the Middle East or you're in places where there's sacred knowledge, you'll see that the raising of children is a focus, and you'd learn these texts at a very early stage in your studies. This book that we're doing, it was in my first year when I went to Tarim. It was one of the first books that we studied, so it studied very early. Now, obviously in our times it's quite an important subject, and how do we raise children, but also how do we raise children in the West, in a society, in a country that is not Muslim. Because when the scholars wrote these books, they were talking about raising Muslim children in Muslim countries. They weren't talking about, they didn't think you're going to have Muslims living in non-Muslim lands. And so they weren't talking about that. So how do we apply that today? And like I said, the same principles, just the methodology has changed. And it's a must for any parent to study or learn how to raise their children. And that's not saying this advice is, or this from the scholars is 100% it's going to work. You do all these things and mashallah you're going to have children who are going to be God-fearing and pious. That doesn't mean that at all. This is just the steps that we as parents have to take to try our best that Allah gives us those type of children. Ultimately, it's down to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just because as parents we may do our best, it doesn't mean we'll have children that will come out as the way that we were hoping that it would. It doesn't work like that. So that's why, as we'll see through this course, that the first and foremost, the most important thing is dua. Making dua for your children. That's your strongest thing that you'll have. Everything else is secondary to that. Just making dua for your children, that Allah give us pious, God-fearing children, inshallah. And like I said, this is not saying this is the correct method, or this is the only method, or this is, if you do this it's going to work. Inshallah it will. And inshallah you'll see most of it is less about the children and more about yourself. And the more you learn on raising children, you see it's more about what you yourself are doing and less about what the children are doing. So it's about the self as well and the tarbiyah of yourself. So inshallah the book we'll be doing is the book by Imam Muhammad bin Ahmad al-Ramli. Imam Ramli was Shamsuddin, he was known as, which means the sun of the religion, as in the sun, the shining sun of the religion. He was also known as the small Shafi'i, because he is in the Shafi'i school. He's one of the two Imams that we go back to. Imam Ibn Hajar and Imam Ramli are the two we go back for fatwa. He's also known as Imam al-Haramain, the Imam of the two harams, and other names as well. And his father was Shihabuddin al-Ramli, and Imam Ramli was born in 1919 Hijri, and he died in 1004 Hijri, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And his father was born in Egypt, and his father was from the greatest ulama scholars of his time. And everybody was studying with Shihabuddin Ramli. And Imam Ramli, this is Imam Ramli's father, and Imam Ramli, Shamsuddin Ramli, his main teacher was his father. And his father said, I've left my son in no need of any other teacher, because I've taught him everything, except in a few things. He has to go and study with somebody else. But he taught him every single thing. Everything came from the father. And even Imam Ramli, and we mentioned Imam Ramli, and then you had Ibn Hajar in the Shafi, both of the two Imams of the Shafi school, both of them studied with Shihabuddin Ramli, the father. And Imam Ramli and Ibn Hajar are always against each other. When you look at their positions in the Shafi school, they always had the same teacher, but they always go against each other in their positions. Radiallahu ta'ala anhum. Now, the father's teacher was Shaykh al-Islam, Imam Zakaria al-Ansari, who's known as Shaykh al-Islam, and he was from one of the greatest scholars, and definitely the greatest scholars of his time. And he would, so Imam Ramli, the younger Ramli, would go to Imam Zakaria al-Ansari's lessons with his father. So his father would take him to his lessons, and up to the age of 7, he would go and attend the lessons for barakah, just for blessings. So that's the first lesson there, that the father would take his son to his teacher's lessons, and he would just sit in the lessons and just like, alhamdulillah, we have kids here today, and kids are making noise, that's just part of their nature, but nobody should be like, get angry, just have some rahmah, show some mercy towards them. And but it's a blessing to bring the kids to our lessons and allow them to benefit, just as the predecessors did. And so it said about him, about Ramli, that he never played with children from a young age. That he was always with his father, he was always in lessons with his father, but he never had friends and he never played around with children. So that gives an understanding of who we're dealing with, and the advice is coming from him, on how to raise children. But he never played with children, and after the death after his father passed away, he took over the lessons of his father. He took over the role of looking after the students and the lessons in regards to that. And he wrote many books. The most famous is his commentary on the Minhaj in the Shafi school, which is the main book in the Shafi school, which is Nihayat al-Minhaj. And that's his most famous work. And this book on raising children, which is called Riyadة al-Sabyan, and we'll look at the word Riyadة. Riyadة doesn't actually means many things, it's quite a general term. But this book he wrote using Imam Ghazali's work. Imam Ghazali's Ihya al-Ulum-ad-Din, Revival of the Religious Sciences, is a book compiled which has 40 books within it. And one of the books within there is Riyadat al-Nafs, the training of the self. And within that he has on how to raise children. So Imam Ramli refers back to the book of Imam Ghazali, and that's the book that he uses in terms of sharing this advice on how to raise children. So we start looking. So the word Riyadة, what does Riyadة mean? And like I said, it's a general term, it doesn't actually mean raising. So even though it's translated as raising. And just to also add, the translation is done by Sheikh Abdulaziz Ahmed Fredericks from Glasgow. Jazakallah khair to him who did this translation. But the word Riyadة, it can mean many things. It means physical training. So when somebody goes and does exercise, it's called Riyadة, that you're doing exercise. Sports, Riyadة. Riyadة is also mathematics. When you talk about maths, that's Riyadة. The training of an animal is called Riyadة. If you take a wild beast, a horse, and you to train it, domesticate it, it's called Riyadة. Domestication of any animal, you call that Riyadة. And also the word comes from, it means to cultivate. So a piece of land that is cultivated, you call it Riyadة. So you're getting a bit of understanding of what the word actually means. It's not just about raising children. So when we when we look at the training, such as sports or mathematics and the like, look at all of these things, what do they share? The similarity they share is this training. If you want to be good at sports, it's all about training, and then you get to your end goal. If you want to be good at maths, it's these constant drills of doing the same thing, repetition over and over again, and then you get towards the end goal. And so that's what Riyadة means. So it's this whole aspect of raising children. The word comes from Rawda as well. So Rawda, which means, as you know, it means a garden. Just the way a garden is, it just doesn't become a beautiful garden. You have to put hard work and labour into it. So you have to look after it, and it doesn't happen overnight. It happens after many years. So you're not going to see the fruits of your hard work straight away. And that's one of the first things, that you won't see the fruits of the hard work when you come raising your children. You want to see it. And that's our goal, because we don't want to see it. We're not going to see it now. Our goal is when they're older, when they're in adulthood, that how will they be then, inshallah. And so that's what Riyadة means. And it's connected to tarbiyah as well, and we'll talk about tarbiyah in a minute. But the second word, Sibyan means a boy. So it's saying, to literally translate it, it means raising or education of a boy. But does it only apply to a boy? No, it applies to male and female. Even though in the poem, Imam Ramli is referring to a boy and his father throughout the poem. But the same applies to a mother to her son, and a mother to her daughter, or father to his daughter. Sabi doesn't only, it can mean both male and female. Even though Imam Ramli is, and you see within the poem, it keeps saying he, so it's referring to the male. So with the book you have many commentaries. So one which are not in English, but Ta'liq wa Bayan Shah Riyadة al-Sabyan, which is by Hussein bin Abdul Qadir al-Faqih. And then the more famous one is this one, which is by Abdullah bin Ahmad Basawdan. And that's the one which we'll be using, and it is translated by Shaykh Abdul Aziz, bits of it. And it's very useful. But that's the one which I've been taking notes from, and that's what we'll be using in terms of explaining the poem, inshallah. So we'll start. So it starts with the Basmala, which is not actually in the translation. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Then he says, all praise is to the one who deserves all praise. So we start with the Basmala. Why do we always start with the Basmala? Those who were in the fiqh class should know. Why do we always start with the Basmala? Or Ghulam should know. And then we start then the Hamdulillah. The Basmala is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Anybody? Why do we start with this one? Like I said, it's a discussion, right?
Blessing.
Huh?
Blessing.
Blessings. What else? So you pick up any book, and it always starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. It's always with starting the name of Allah, then praising Allah. Why? Daniel, you were here, fiqh, right?
For intention?
Huh?
For intention?
Anyone? Seeking blessings, intention, but there's three reasons. The first reason, so there's somebody who attends fiqh class. So the first reason is that Allah's book starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So whenever we start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, because that's how the book starts. The Quran starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and so on. The second is due for the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, "Kullu amrin dhi bal la yubda fihi bi Bismillah fahuwa akhta." Every affair that does not start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, that it is cut off, severed. Meaning that it's cut off of any type of barakah or reward. So that's the second reason. The third is because it was the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when he would write letters out to people, he would always start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim to follow his sunnah. So those are the three reasons. The holy book starts with Bismillah, and then because of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then following the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then it says that all praise is to the one who deserves all praise. It says the one who makes humankind amenable to guidance. And amenable here, the Arabic word is tawfiq. For those who understand a bit of Arabic, you know tawfiq has much greater meaning than just being amenable. It means where Allah gives you, I don't know how to translate it, but Allah gives you an opening of, and gives you, He just keeps giving you, He gives you the ability to receive these blessings from Him. And this is tawfiq. And He says to receive what? To guidance, hidayah. And guidance means guidance upon the correct, not guidance upon that which is wrong, so guidance upon the straight path. And for what He has bestowed upon us, and from the blessings that He's given us, such as from creating, He's made us, He created us, and then He's blessed us with one of the greatest blessings of Islam. And He says a praise that encompasses the earth and the sky. And then after what we have said comes salutations, salat, a upon the Prophet and his family and companions. What does salah mean? Salutation. What is salah? Arabic students.
Prayer.
Dua.
Dua, yes. What else can it mean?
To pray.
Huh?
Praying.
Praying. Yeah. So it's rahma makruna bit-ta'zim. It's mercy connected with honoring. It's mercy connected with honoring the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's also so he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, first and foremost, he is our means, our wasila to receiving the divine mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we send him salawat. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us in the Quran to send salawat upon him. Inna Allah wa malaikatu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O you who believe, sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. And it's upon the Prophet and his family and companions. And the family here means al. And some of the scholars in Basaudan mentions that it said al is not just his family, it's also said that it's all the believers. The al can mean anybody that believes, comes under the banner of al-Nabi, of the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he says, and follow on. Know that the education of children from the initial stages is a great affair. So he says that education, the word is for education is ta'deeb, yeah, which comes from adab. So even here, education isn't really an accurate translation, because ta'deeb can mean, it means a lot more than just educating. Ta'deeb, do you want me to write that on the board, ta'deeb? Or no? You do Arabic, that's why you say no. Yeah? So, but ta'deeb is the process of giving adab. Yeah? Comes from the word adab. And adab means to put something in its correct place. Yeah? The word adab actually means to put something in its correct place. And it's the training, or any type of training that is praiseworthy, which benefits one, falls under this, under ta'deeb. Any type of training that benefits you or benefits us comes under adab. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that there's three things are not considered time wasting. And he says ta'deeb al-fars, training a horse. And 2, playing with the family. And 3, shooting arrows. And there's 3 things that are not time wasting. Ta'deeb al-fars, that training a horse. The second is playing with family, spending time with your family. And third is shooting arrows. Yeah, so we see the all 3, and there's no, you can spend as much time in it, and it's always reward connected to it. It doesn't matter how much time you spend, it's not considered time wasting. So spending time with your family and showing them love and affection and going out with them is from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's from his command. And if you look at the horse, so once it receives ta'deeb, this ta'deeb of giving of adab, that it's then from becoming a wild animal, it becomes something that is domesticated, something that's under your control, and something that is loved, and you are connected to it. And so to look at the word so if we look at the word adab itself, the word adab actually, or adaba, it means to banquet. Yeah, so adaba actually means to banquet, and that's where ta'deeb comes from. Yeah, so with ta'deeb, which is what we're talking about, and the word adaba literally means to banquet. And if we look at a banquet, so if somebody goes to a banquet, what do you see? The food is prepared, the table's out, everything's arranged, the invitations are sent out. So you have this whole arrangement of the food and the place, and everything is put, all these arrangements are made. That's where the word is coming, the meaning comes from. So It's a more general meaning, the word adab. It's quite a general meaning. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, my Lord gave me adab and excelled in giving my adab. So his adab of the Prophet ﷺ, he said that ta'deeb came from who? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His ta'deeb. And he said he gave me the most excellent of ta'deeb. And then he also said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that the Quran is the ma'dab of Allah. Ma'dab is an actual banquet. So if you to have a banquet, you'd call that the ma'duba. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying the ma'duba, the banquet of Allah, is the Quran. So if you want to feast on receiving this ta'deeb, where do you even need to feast on? Feast on the Quran. So just place everything into his holy book. And he's saying it sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is the ma'bad of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Quran. And then this is why Sayyidina Aisha, she says what? She says, Kana khuluquhu al-Quran. His characteristics, his nature was the Quran. Because that's where his ta'deeb took place. He received everything from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that was his, when he received the Quran, he received this process of adab, or ta'deeb. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So then he says, and so from the initial stages is a great affair. So following on, know that the education of children, or the ta'deeb of children, from the initial stages is a great affair. And so Basaudan here says, what does he mean? The initial stages means from the age of tamyiz, or the age where a child knows right from wrong. Yeah, so which normally is around the age of 7, or tamyiz is at the age of 7, where the child has discernment. And scholars differ in their explanation of what does tamyiz mean, and most commonly is where a child is able to feed himself or herself, wash themselves and clothe themselves. So they're able to take care of their own needs. That's the age of tamyiz, and it's roughly at around the age of 7. So this is what Imam al-Ramli is saying. It's from the initial stages, from these stages, but it's actually before that. It starts before that. This is where the formal type of education starts, but the process of ta'deeb has actually started way before that, and it starts when you choose your spouse, and it applies to both men and women. And that when you choose your spouse, that's when this process of ta'deeb starts. And that's why when we marry, we should marry those who are God-fearing themselves, those who are going to better you. And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Tunka al-mar'a li-arba li-maliha wa li-hasabiha wa li-jimaliha wa li-diniha." That a woman is only married for 4 reasons: for her wealth, for her status, for her beauty, and for her religion. And then he said, marry her for her religion. And same applies the other way. It's not just how a man marries a woman. We apply the hadith the other way as well. That a woman should only marry for those 4 reasons, and they should only marry somebody for their religion, and not because of other things, not because of their beauty, or not because of their wealth or their status in society. You marry for the person's religion. And in another hadith, he said, choose well for your embryos. Choose well for your embryos, for surely genes will be transferred. So this process of ta'deeb actually started, from the moment you choose your spouse, and then the moment you have those relations with your spouse, that the Prophet ﷺ is saying some things are inherited. And so if certain things your child would inherit from their mother, certain things the child would inherit certain things from their father, and so you have to be careful and wary of who you choose as your spouse. And then he says, and certainly Al-Ghazali has made that clear, and he is an ocean of knowledge, true in his advice. He encouraged in Ihya Ulum ad-Din the responsibility of parents towards their children. So he mentions here And certainly Al-Ghazali has made that clear, and what he means by that is that Imam Ghazali, who was born in the year 450 Hijri and died in 505 Hijri in Tus, and inshallah you all know who Imam Ghazali is. He was a jurist, a theologian, and like I said at the beginning, this poem is taken from Imam Ghazali's Ihya Ulumuddin, and that's how Imam Ramli compiled this poem. So he's saying that Imam Ghazali, who's an ocean of knowledge, has already given you this advice, but Ramli has just put this in poetic form for us. And then he says the responsibility of parents towards their children. So if we look at the word adab, what do you understand of the word adab? Because we all use it, right? Adab. Manners. Etiquette. What other words would you associate with adab from the sisters? Huh? Respect. What else? Listening. I'm looking for a word, that's why I'm asking. Character.
Upbringing.
There you are. What else? If you're somebody who has adab, how do you behave with other people? Respectfully. Kindly. Polite. All of these things mean what? That you're just towards other people. That when you deal with other people, you're just in there. They have rights upon you and you fulfill their rights. And you're just. And what's the opposite of being just? Adl in Arabic. What's the opposite of just? Unjust. And what's the Arabic? It's the same in Urdu. Zulm. Yeah? Opposite of zulm. And what does zulm, the word zulm mean? Its actual real meaning. To put something in a place where it doesn't belong. And what does adab mean? To put something in a place where it actually belongs. And you see that these are all two things which are opposite ends of the spectrum. That you have adab and you have zulm. And they both, adab is connected to justice. And the opposite of that is to be a zalim. And to have the zulm, that you're not going to put things in its places. You're not going to give people their rights. You're not going to fulfill people. You're going to oppress others. And that's what zulm means. So when we teach, or when we give ta'deeb, so as a parent we give ta'deeb to our children. So we are just towards them. But I'll put your dad on the spot now. But is your dad just towards you all the time?
Yeah.
Or is he sometimes a zalim? Huh?
Adab.
Now, is he always just towards you, or sometimes is he unjust?
Just.
Huh? You sure?
Just.
Yeah?
Yeah.
He's got a big smile and smirk on his face now. But he's just, right?
Have to
But
tell
do you
the
think
truth.
sometimes he's unjust?
No.
So do you know what's the difference between just and unjust?
Yes.
How do you know that?
I read a lot of books.
You read a lot of books, mashallah. But what's taught you that something's just? The books? Or is it something that you just
Just
learn?
now. Just now.
Yeah. So where did that come from? Him knowing that someone's being just towards me or someone's being unjust. That's from the natural disposition of a human being. That you grow up knowing something's just and something's unjust. So now imagine your child, and I'm sure your dad probably has been unjust towards you. Inshallah, he's always been just. But sometimes as parents we fall short. Yeah? Sometimes we are unjust maybe towards our children, and we fall short in that aspect. But their natural fitra, the natural state of a child, recognizes when someone's just and when someone's unjust. It's just a natural thing that's in human beings. So, and our children, they know that and they realize that, and that's why when we deal with our children, we always have to be people who are just towards them, and give them. So that means you yourself have to have what? Adab. You have to have gone through this process of ta'deeb yourself. How are you going to give your children adab if you yourself you don't have adab? And you yourself are doing things which you don't want your children to see. And they mention in the books such as when a father, if he's smoking, and he shouldn't do it. One, he shouldn't be smoking it, full stop. And two, he shouldn't do it in front of his children. So go somewhere where your children can't see you and do it there. And because we shouldn't be unjust towards our children. So, what other words would you say? What other words do you think, or is there any other words that you would connect to raising children? Just words, single words.
Patience.
Patience. There you are. What else? Anything else from the sisters? Huh? Did I hear someone say something? Hikmah, wisdom, aywa. Being kind. We have these four terms, which there's many other terms you can associate with raising children, but you have four main common themes or common terms with raising children. Now, ta'deeb, which is the one that we've been looking at. Then you also have tadris or ta'lim, which mean, what does tadris mean or ta'lim? Wahid. MashaAllah, Arabic students are excelling. What does tadris or ta'lim mean? Huh?
Talim is education.
Education. Ta'lim is education. And tadris, the same thing, education. Comes from darasa. Yes. And tarbiyah. Huh? Discipline. Again, tarbiyah is one of those terms that's quite generic. It's not that easy to, and it means more of a development, discipline, development. So it's the development of a child. We have these four terms, and all these four are closely connected in the raising of a child. And so we've looked at ta'deeb. Where does ta'lim come from? It comes from the word alima too. What does alima mean?
To learn.
To learn, yeah, and to know, to acquire something. And so it's on the second form, which is taf'il, and it's the masdar, so ta'lim, which means to give somebody knowledge, to teach somebody. Tadris is on the same form, which means what? To give somebody knowledge. Ta'deeb is on the same form, to give somebody adab, or teach them adab. And then you have the last one, which is tarbiyah, which is the same. Yeah? And tarbiyah means development. So what's the common theme in all of those?
Education.
To give somebody adab, to give somebody knowledge, educate somebody, to give somebody tarbiyah. Yeah? So it's a process of what? Giving. So there's nothing passive about it. It's what? There's always a fa'il, there's a doer there, that there's somebody who's there, who's taken that position, taken that role of giving that education, giving that adab, giving that ta'deeb. And that's the role of who? Of the parents. Yeah? That these four you have, ta'deeb, ta'lim, tadris, which means the same thing, and tarbiyah. They're all acts of giving. And so there's nothing passive about raising children. But which is a sad thing that today we've become what? And tarbiyah, which means, comes from rabba. What does rabba mean? I can only see Rahid, who comes to Arabic. So rabba means to grow. And that's why it comes from Rabba, means to grow. Tarbiyah is development, growth. But they all, you see that all of these are acts of giving, so there's always a doer there. And it's not about being passive. And raising children is not, you can't just sit around and do nothing. And just let, which is the opposite. What we're doing today, we are doing that. And we send our kids to school. And, okay, khalas, I don't need to teach them. They go to school. Come home from school, go to mosque. I don't need to teach you anything in the religion. Come back from mosque, here's an iPad. Sit in front of it. Just keep busy. Let me do my thing. Okay, here's your food. And then go to sleep. And that's it. That's the day done. That's the common day in most families, right? That's the parents. Where's the parents' job? It's hardly involved. They're not involved in the education. Not actually teaching the child anything. Not involved in the Islamic education. Not teaching them anything. They're not involved in with the children when they're at home. Not spending any time. Just give them an iPad. Keep them busy. And then when they go to sleep, just go to sleep. You're not going to do anything. You go to your bed. Go to your room. Go to sleep. That's it. So I watch TV. Sit around. That's what we've come to, and that's where there's no. You see that it was never like that for the raising. The scholars never raised their children like that. The layman didn't raise his children like that. And it's only now where we've got this introduction of where we live in these modern societies, where we have all this introduction of technology, where we think, okay, and that's the issue, because we just send our children to school. They go to school when you're done. It's the responsibility of parents towards encouraging it. The responsibility of parents towards their children. So this is the haqq of a child upon his father, or upon his parents, both mother and father. And this is why when there's the famous story of when Sayyidina Umar, when the man came to Sayyidina Umar and he complained that his child was transgressed his rights. So Sayyidina Umar summoned the son. He said, come, what have you done? You transgressed your father. And he said, but do I not have rights upon him? He said, yes, you do. And he said, what are my rights? And he says, one, that he chooses for you a mother that is from the Salihat, that she's noble in her descent, in her character, she's a good woman. And he said, well, he married a Majusi, he married somebody who worships the fire. She's not even Muslim, he's married somebody who's not Muslim. And then he said, he has to give you you have a right that he gives you a good name. He says, he hasn't given me a good name. And he called me Khamfasa, a dung beetle. And he said, that's the name he's given me. And then he said that in the third is that he educates you. He said, he's never taught me anything. And so the Prophet, Sayyidina Umar, then turns to the father and he says, you transgressed his rights before he transgressed yours. You did that to him first, and then you got in return, obviously, if you have fulfilled his rights, in return, what do you expect? And so, our children, they have this right upon us, and it's the haqq which we have to fulfill. And just like any contract, any agreement that we have, whether it's when you buy and sell, even nikah, marriage, it's a contract. Even your children, although it's not a contract, but it's like a contract, because you have this agreement with you and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's an amana, it's a trust. So it's not about just sitting around and let's send my kids to school and let them deal with it. Send them to masjid, let them deal with it. You have to be involved in their education. You have to be involved in send them to school. And here we're talking about education. When we talk about education, which he mentions later, I think, in terms of what is fard. Anyway, he does. So going to responsibility, and our example then is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we always take from his example. And who were the best of children? To ask who throughout time has ever lived, other than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was somebody's child. But other than him, who were the best of children? Huh? Hasnain. Okay. Who else? Go one higher. Fatima Zahra, Kulthum, Ruqayya. The children of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But why did they all turn out to be God-fearing? And why did they all turn out?
Because they saw their father, how
he was.
parents, that's
Because of the upbringing, the ta'deeb that the Prophet sallallahu, or was it because he's a prophet that they were going to turn out like that?
No.
No, because if you say that, then what's the argument against that? Just because he's a prophet, that's why his children turned out like, alhamdulillah, mashallah, they turned out to be who they were because he was a prophet.
The story of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam.
Nuh alayhi salam, yeah, he was a prophet, but his son turned out what? Disobedient, who didn't believe. Yeah, so just because we were Adam alayhi salam, yeah, so just because he's a prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam didn't mean his children had this special protection. No, he worked hard sallallahu alayhi wasallam on their ta'deeb, on their upbringing. He was concerned about their upbringing. And again, if we look at the story of Nuh alayhi salam, just because you do all those things, does that mean that because did Sayyidina Nuh, did he fall short in his upbringing of his children? No, that's impossible. He's a prophet, right? So that means he gave the best type of upbringing to his child. But how did his child turn out? So it's in whose hands at the end of the day? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have no control, but we try to do our best. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam family, he worked hard sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his children in their upbringing and how he was with them sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And like we said, he spent time with them in the house sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's why we come on to then that one of the most important things that we do for our children is that we make dua for them. And before we make dua, we have to have this do tawbah ourselves, and we ask Allah if He forgives us for our shortcomings. And Allah says in the Quran, it says, وَأَصْلِحْ لِي فِي ذُرِّيَّتِي إِنِّي تُبْتُ إِلَيْكَ وَإِنِّي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ in Surah Al-Ahqaf. O Allah, rectify my offspring. Verily I have repented to you, and surely I am from those who surrender to you. This is a dua which we should recite. And there's many other verses in the Quran which we should use as dua for our children and constantly say them. Because just as Zakaria alayhi salam, when he saw Maryam and she was in the room and he saw this food in front of her, what did he say? He made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? And he says, Allah says in the Quran, هُنَالِكَ دَعَى زَكَرِيَّ رَبَّهُ قَالَ رَبِّ هَبْ لِي مِنْ لَدُنْكَ ذُرِّيَّةً طَيِّبَةً إِنَّكَ سَمِيعُ الدُّعَاء. My Lord, grant me from you good offspring. Indeed, you are the hero of prayers. So, alhamdulillah, who has children here? Most, right? Everyone's got it. Jibreel?
No.
Yes, most have children. So,
Doing the course already.
when your child was born, I don't want you to put your hand up, but when your child was born, how many of us actually made dua for the child that Allah makes them God-fearing, righteous, from the Salihin, the moment they were born? Think about it. Did we all make that dua, or were we in the moment of the joy, and we showed shukr inshallah, but did we actually make dua that Allah protect them as soon as they're born? Because now he's come into and that's why the baby screams. It comes because he doesn't want to come into the world. And then when the baby comes out and you hear the scream, the baby's screaming because it doesn't want to come into the world. And because it's living in the mother's belly, it's protected from the dunya. As soon as it comes out, it doesn't want to come into this world, and so it screams. So how many of us actually made dua in that moment? And that's what Sayyidina Maryam's mother, when she gave birth, what's the first thing she did? She made dua, Ya Allah, you protect her from who? From shaitan. That's the first dua that she made to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That she's a girl, she promised that whoever, if she was to have a child, that if it was a boy, that she would promise her for Allah's worship alone. And that she was given a girl, and that's the first dua that she made, that Allah protect her from the shaitan. And so lastly then, do we favor boys over girls, or girls over boys? Should we favor boys? Is there anything better to have boys than to have girls, or to have girls over boys?
Depends on the boys, isn't it? What you get, yeah.
Yeah, obviously we don't favor boys over girls, and nor do we favor girls over boys. Whatever comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever He gives us, alhamdulillah, we show shukr and gratitude to Him. And actually having girls, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam hadith in regards to having girls and raising girls, where the Sahabi asked that he had 3 girls, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he who raises 3 girls and they become God-fearing children and from the salihat, that person will be in Jannah. So another Sahabi, he had 2, so he said, and what about 2 ya Rasulullah? He said, and 2. Then he had 1 girl, he said, and what about 1 ya Rasulullah? And he said, and the one that has 1. So there's a lot of blessings to girls, and they say girls are rizq. If you have a girl, with a girl comes rizq. Why? Because a boy, generally when he's going to be older, he's going to be working and he'll earn his own rizq. Whereas a girl, it's a father's duty to take care of her, and so he's going to be taking care of her for longer, so Allah gives more rizq when she's younger. But here, you've had a girl have more to take care of her. And we see it in our lives when we have daughters. And there's a famous story of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu that some of you may have heard of, where that he was sitting and he started to smile and then he began to weep. Have you heard of the story? Yeah, that he was smiling. Why was he smiling?
Used to eat dates made out of
He used to make the dates. He used to make statues out of the date, and they would then worship it. So he was laughing at the stupidity, and then he's cried because they say he buried his own daughter. That's why he's crying. This is a false story of Sayyidina Umar. It's a lie upon Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And that hadith, it doesn't exist. There's no sanad to it, and they say that was put into our books by certain groups, without naming them, who weren't happy with Sayyidina Umar. And so that's not a true story about Sayyidina Umar. And Sayyidina Umar never did such a thing. Sayyidina Hafsa, why would Sayyidina Hafsa marry the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam if he buried his daughters? Sayyidina Hafsa was his daughter, and she married the best of men sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if that story was true, why did Sayyidina Hafsa survive? So it's not true upon Sayyidina Umar, it's a lie upon him radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Good time. 8:25.
Yeah, 8:24.
Okay, we'll finish in a few. Just finish this section, inshallah. He says the upbringing of a child in the early years. So he encouraged in the Ihya al-Muddin the responsibility of parents towards their children, the upbringing of a child in the early years. So he says early years here in Arabic he says sighrihi, so when he is small. Because when they're young, it starts when they're young, because at this age where they're still closer to their natural disposition. So the ta'deeb starts at that early age because they're more willing to accept. And then he says, will increase his portion in the latter years. So if you do it in the early years, you'll see what? You'll see the benefit in the later years when they're older. You won't see it straight away. You won't see it in a year's time. You won't see it in 2 years' time. It's going to be when they're older, 15, 16, 17, 18. When they're in their adulthood, that's when you'll see the fruits of the hard work of raising children. Just as you see when you cultivate land, do you see the fruit straight away? The hard work, you put the hard work in, and then you see the fruits of your hard work later on. So we shouldn't be looking for any immediate change in our children. And we're not looking for them to change overnight or over a week or over a year, years. And that's why we all have children. And once you've had children, your responsibility now. You need to work hard on raising them. He says, and in that he will gain in abundance good fortune. What it means is that when he's older, he will have, in terms of good fortune, that he will earn. Basauda mentions that he will earn people's respect. People would come towards him or her. He will earn their respect through his good character, through his good nature and his treatment of others, and also receive Allah's blessings. And he'll receive peace in this world, rahatul dunya, meaning that he'll receive peace in this world, that he won't be chasing the world. And that's the only way you're going to have peace in this world. If you're chasing the dunya, you'll never have peace in this world. So the only way that your children will have peace in this world is if they're not chasing the dunya. And that's what they will have, inshallah, through that good upbringing and goodness of the next. So if he's not chasing the dunya in this, when he comes to the next world, he will only have goodness there. He says, therefore, educating the child is a must for every grandfather, father and everyone given responsibility. So educating, ta'deeb, is a must for every grandfather. He brings it in there. It's not in order there, because it's first, who is it first and foremost upon? The raising of children, who does it fall upon first and foremost?
Father.
Father and the
Mother.
the parents. If there's no mother and father, then it goes to the grandfather. It falls upon the grandfather. But it's not only, so just if we say somebody has a mother and father alive, still, do the grandparents have responsibility? Yes, they still do. Then he says what? And anyone given responsibility. Anybody, everybody who comes in contact with them has a responsibility with them. They're teachers. Yes? When parents send their children to be taught, the teachers have responsibility in that child's upbringing, that child, raising that child. Their relatives and grandparents. And grandparents can be an issue. As we all probably know, grandparents can be an issue because when you're raising your children, you're telling your child off in front of the grandparent. What does the grandparent do? Tells you off for being their child. And then so the child is now getting confused, thinking, hold on a minute, what's going on? Because he's not listening to his mum, he's not listening to his dad, they're shouting at him, he's not listening, so I'll do the same. And that's why grandparents have to realise as well, that you can't, if the parents are telling the child off, as a grandparent you have to just sit back. If you're not happy with it, then take your child later, separately, talk to them alone and say, look, you should not have done that, you're wrong, or whatever. But don't do it in front of the child. Because if you're contradicting each other, the children, they're clever, they see everything, and they take it, they're like a sponge, they'll take everything on board straight away. As soon as they see that, they see you're not listening to your mum or your dad, they will see that and they will take that from you. Okay, he's not listening, so and they will question, why is he not listening to his mum and dad? He's telling me to do such and such thing. So grandparents is a tricky one. You have to use hikmah, like the sister said, right? Hikmah in educating your children. You have to use hikmah when it comes to your parents. Because we still, at the end of the day, we're still their children, and we have, inshallah, they did that same process of ta'deeb, and we should show them respect, and that's how our children will deal with us. Birru aba'akum tabarrakum abna'akum. Honor your parents, and your children will honor you. Show them respect, and your children will show you respect. And anyone given responsibility, and what he means by here is the aitam, the orphans. And those who are responsible for looking after orphans, you have a responsibility as well. And the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever passes his hand on the head of an orphan, showing mercy, will receive reward for every hair he passes over. He said, the best home among the Muslims is in the one in which there is an orphan who is treated well. But how many homes do we have in the West where there's an orphan living in those homes? One of the things which we lack in our communities is fostering and adoption, whereas in those societies it was common. Every house had a yatim. The Prophet ﷺ had several. But that's something which, as a community, we need to look at on adopting and fostering children, because we have in Woking, we have Muslim children with non-Muslim families. So, and those are our responsibility as a community. Because if those children, they don't have parents, the responsibility falls upon grandparents. They don't have grandparents, the responsibility falls upon who? The community. It's a communal obligation. So that child, on the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah, who's sitting now in a non-Muslim family, will testify against every single one of us here in Woking for falling short in their upbringing. So it's something that, as a community, we really need to think about. He says, for he is a trust granted to them. So he's an amana, the child that is given to us, and his heart is open to their education. And so his heart, and he's saying here that the child is willing to take whatever his parents will give to them. So he says, just 5 more minutes inshallah, and then we'll finish. He says the mother should caution her child with the father. So the mother should caution the child with her father, right? So it's not saying that there's a bad guy and a good guy, but the father has, and there's always within the family, the structure of a family, the father is trying to put this in a nice way so the sisters don't. Right? But the father is like the head of the family. But there's like we said, the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everyone's a shepherd, and the father is a shepherd to his family, and he says the mother is a shepherd to her household. Yeah? When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to Sayyidina Ali and Sayyidina Fatima, and when they were arguing, and he said Sayyidina Ali was sulking in the masjid. So he goes to Ali and he says, "What is wrong, Ya Ali?" And this is his own daughter, and he says to her, show her some mercy, show rahmah towards her, to Fatima. She was wrong, but show her mercy, and you deal with whatever's outside the home. And he goes to Fatima and let her deal with what's inside the home. And he goes to Fatima, his daughter, radiallahu ta'ala anha, and she's sulking. And he says to her, look, just let him deal with whatever's outside the house, and you deal with what's inside the house. Radiallahu ta'ala anha. So it's a partnership. Yeah? Raising children, and it's a partnership. But the mother should caution her child with the father. Meaning, when he does something wrong, you say, I'm going to tell your dad. Yeah? Because why? Why are we saying this? Why should she caution against the father?
The father very rarely get angry, and the father knows the reason, and the child say the father the most.
There you are. Yeah, without a doubt, there's a type of connection and a power a father has over his children that is different to a mother. And Allah has placed them in separate roles. A mother has more rahmah, without a doubt, towards her children than a father does. Yeah, that's without a shadow of doubt. Children, and a power over his children that the mother doesn't, because everybody has their own roles. And that's why if the father, you'll see there's many sisters, mashallah, and there's many sisters who are raising their children, mashallah, without single parents, single women raising their children, mashallah, we're talking about more in general. Those are specifics. We're talking in generality, in general things. So, but the father has this special power over his family. So we all probably know many where the father he's not very practicing, not pious, not really praying, not doing anything. And the mother, mashallah, she's wearing hijab, she's praying, she's doing all these things. And many of those children do what? When they think of their mother, they're just like, yeah. But they're still connected, they have this special bond with their father. Because every child sees their father as their role model, as Superman. Yeah? From a young age, my father, that's it, right? My dad can beat your dad up. My dad, you say that to a young child, right? I'm telling you, any young kid, you say to my dad can beat your dad up, you get, it's not, no, my dad can beat your dad up. Because they have this special connection with their parents, and their dad has to be like the best. So you imagine now that the father doesn't live up to that reputation. He's just lazy, watches TV, smoking, doing all these things. He's not living up to that level, that bar that child wants to see his father at. And he sees other people's fathers like that. Because the child has to be in awe of his father. When he looks at his father, he must see him and be like, yeah, I want to be like that. And he doesn't fear him, and the sister said fear, in the sense that he fears the whipping. He fears losing his father's love. He fears his father gazing upon him with disappointment. That's what the fear of a child we need to instill in him. Not the fear of being shouted at, screamed at, or being hit. The fear should be that I'm going to upset my father. He's going to look at me with disappointment. And that's what the fear, that when a child has that fear, he's not going to want to upset the father. So that's why a mother should caution her child using the father. And if the father has bad habits, like we said, this is, first of all, we have to rectify ourselves before we try to help our children. First and foremost, we have to sort ourselves out. But today, obviously, these roles are not as clear as they were back in those times, because back in those times the man was the breadwinner, the woman would take care of the household. Now everything's it's all over. The family structure is actually completely broken, where both parents are working and hardly spending any time with the kids. So how do we apply that today in this family structure? Because even the kids, they see that, they don't really, okay, what's going on? Mum's at work, dad's at work, and who's actually there responsible for raising the children and their upbringing? The school is. Which school? The non-Muslims. So that's where they're being raised. Even from a young age, we'll send them when they're You know, when they're in their infancy, year, 2 years, go to daycare, or whatever they call it, right? Just go to daycare. Allah, and this is what he's going to talk about later, suhbah. And one whole chapter is on suhbah, companionship. And he talks about how the mother should just be the child's companion from a young age. Don't let them go out of your sight. But yet we're quick to what? Offload them, get them to school, get them to put them into daycare, get them outside the house, and we think that's the best. And he's going to interact with other children. And we look down upon good traits like hayat, shyness. And you see a shy kid, and some of you may know my son, but he's not here. But when he was young, he was like, he's a problem. He was really shy. Like, he was super shy. And I remember people would say, you know, he's just too shy. He wouldn't even talk to people. He's really shy. So I went to my teachers and I said, make dua for him. He's really shy. And I remember the answer was, he said, the Prophet's shyer than him. And that just shut me up. I just stayed quiet. He said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is shyer than him. You think he's shy? And that was for me, it was like, SubhanAllah, been thinking about his shyness and in a negative way all these years, where you have to look at the good side of it. And now you see him, now he's got, that shyness is gone, right? But it's just, at a young age, children are very delicate. And these good traits we should try to instill in them. And not look at these traits in a negative manner. And it's difficult because as parents you want to raise them in the best way, but if you see a good trait in your child, raise them upon that good trait. Don't try changing it. Because inshallah, with sincere intention, with good niyyah, inshallah, you'll see that they will develop into good children, inshallah. So, also then he says, protecting him from inequality and folly, his heart is like a pure candle, able to adopt any form. And so it is necessary that they habituate their children to doing righteous deeds so they attain felicity. Yeah. So it's upon us to, and this is what we mean by it, repetition. You keep them upon a tartib, they have a repetition where they keep doing certain things every day, so that way it becomes something that's normal to them. Praying at a young age, we'll look at that later, but making sure they're doing it every day so it becomes something that is just part of their daily life. So these things, reading Quran in the morning, is part of their daily life. It becomes something normality to them. Whereas if you're saying to them once in a while, read Quran, it's not normal, then it becomes a chore, it becomes difficult. And at the same time, we have to give, so when, obviously the child needs to have boundaries, parameters as well. When you transgress, you're going to be punished. But that punishment there has to be consistency. You punish them one day for doing something, next day you don't punish them for doing the same thing. The child gets confused, okay, I did it one day, punished me, and then the other day I didn't do it, didn't punish me. So if they do it, you just have to have consistency. If you do these things, you're going to get punished. If you do these things, you're going to get rewarded. So if you have that consistency, a child learns from those and becomes used to those. So disciplining with consistency is vital. Inshallah, so we'll stop there. And then it goes on to the early years. Inshallah, alhamdulillah. Is there any questions? Any questions from the sisters? الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله سيدنا محمد. يا ربنا اعترفنا بأننا اقترفنا وأننا أسرفنا على لظى أشرفنا فتوب علينا توبة تغسل لي كل هوبة واسترنا الأورات وعامر روآتي وكل والدينا ربي ومولودينا وأهلي والإخواني وسائر الخلان وكل ذي محبة أو جيرة وصحبة والمسلمين أجمع آمين ربي اسمع فضلا وجود منا لا باكتساب منا بالمصطفى رسولي نحظى بكل سولي بالمصطفى رسولي نحظى بكل سولي بالمصطفى رسولي نحظى بكل سولي وصلى وسلم ربي عليه عد الهب وآله وصحبه إذا تشي صحبه والحمد لله في البدء والتناهي سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين في كل لحظة أبدا عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومدار كلماته اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه الفاتحة.